For 8 years, Grandma gave her sick granddaughter medicine every day until one day. Suspicious, the granddaughter hid a recorder in the living room, and what she heard in the recording left her perplexed. The alarm clock went off at 6:30 a.m., as always. Sarah opened her eyes slowly, staring at the white ceiling of her bedroom. 16 years old, and a routine stricter than that of many adults. She sighed, mentally preparing herself for another day of pills, syrups, and the constant vigilance of her grandmother. Evelyn. "Sarah, it's time for your first dose of medicine." Evelyn's voice echoed down the hallway, punctuating the morning silence like clockwork. Sarah got up, her bare feet touching the cold floor. Her reflection in the mirror showed a pale girl, with faint dark circles under her blue eyes. Uncombed blonde hair framed a face that seemed to carry the weight of the world. She wondered, not for the first time, what it would be like to wake up without the shadow of illness hanging over her head. She crossed the hallway towards the kitchen, where Evelyn, at 68, was already up, bustling about as always. The breakfast table was a pharmaceutical arsenal, pills of various colors and sizes, syrup bottles, and a glass of water, all meticulously arranged. "Good morning, darling," Evelyn smiled, her hazel eyes shining with a mixture of love and concern. "Sayaka, how are you feeling today?" "I'm fine, Grandma," Sarah replied automatically, sitting down at the table. It was always the same question, always the same answer. Evelyn watched intently as Sarah swallowed each pill, one by one. "Don't forget your immunity syrup," she reminded, pushing a bottle of amber liquid towards her granddaughter. Sarah looked at the bottle with a flicker of resistance. "Grandma, don't you think maybe I could cut back on the medication a little? I mean, I feel fine most of the time." Evelyn's smile wavered for an instant. "Sarah, darling, you know we can't risk it. Your condition is delicate." The doctors were very clear about that. Sarah nodded silently, swallowing the syrup with a grimace. The bitter taste seemed to symbolize all the frustration she felt. After breakfast, Evelyn helped Sarah get dressed, insisting on a long-sleeved shirt and a scarf, despite the sunny day outside. "We can't let you catch a chill," she explained, adjusting the scarf around her granddaughter's neck. Sarah looked out the window, watching kids her age riding bikes, laughing and chatting. Their freedom seemed a world away. "Grandma, I was thinking, maybe I could go to school today," Sarah asked hesitantly, knowing the answer before she even finished the sentence. Evelyn froze, her eyes widening with concern. "Oh, darling, you know that's not safe. Your immune system, all those people, all those germs. No, it's best we continue with homeschooling." Sarah sighed, resigned. Her life was a bubble, protected and suffocating at the same time. The rest of the morning followed the usual routine. Online classes, periodically interrupted by Evelyn bringing more medicine or checking Sarah's temperature. Lunch was a carefully balanced meal, followed by more pills. In the afternoon, while Evelyn napped, Sarah allowed herself a moment of rebellion. She opened her bedroom window, letting the gentle breeze touch her face. She closed her eyes, imagining what it would be like to run through the park, swim in a lake, live without the constant fear of getting sick. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her quickly close the window. Evelyn entered the room, carrying a tray with more medicine. "It's time for your afternoon dose, darling," she announced, placing the tray on the nightstand. Sarah looked at the pills, a strange feeling forming in her stomach. "Grandma," she began hesitantly, "do you remember that day last month when I forgot to take my morning medicine?" Evelyn frowned, clearly disturbed by the memory. "Of course I do. I was so worried." "Why?" "It's just, I felt good that day." "Better than usual, actually," Sarah confessed, her voice low, almost a whisper. Evelyn's face paled. "Sarah, don't say that. It was pure luck you didn't get sick. We can't risk your health like that." Sarah nodded, swallowing the pills obediently, but a seed of doubt had been planted in her mind. She watched her grandmother leave the room, noticing for the first time the tremor in Evelyn's hands, the fear in her eyes. That night, lying in bed, Sarah reflected on her life, on the suffocating routine of medications and precautions. For the first time, She wondered if there was more to this story than her grandmother was letting on. Outside her room, Evelyn lingered for a long moment, her hand on the doorknob, her face a mask of worry and something else. Guilt. Fear. Whatever it was clear that the secrets in this house went far beyond the medicine bottles on Sarah's nightstand. Sarah woke up in the middle of the night, sweaty and breathless. Another nightmare, or was it a memory? The images mingled in her mind like an incomplete puzzle, pieces missing, others distorted by time and uncertainty. She sat up in bed, her eyes adjusting to the darkness of the room. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Sarah sighed, knowing sleep wouldn't return anytime soon. She got up silently, careful not to wake her grandmother in the next room. Her bare feet led her to the old wooden chest in the corner of the room. Carefully, she opened it, the soft creak sounding too loud in the silence of the night. Inside, among blankets and old toys, was a worn shoebox. Sarah picked it up reverently, as if holding a fragile treasure. Sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, Sarah opened the box. The faint moonlight filtering through the window was enough to illuminate its contents. Old photos, birthday cards, small mementos of a life that seemed to belong to someone else. Her fingers found one particular photo. In it, a young, smiling couple held a little girl, no more than 3 years old. Sarah, her parents, and a world of possibilities that never materialized. She stared at the smiling faces, trying to evoke memories that seemed increasingly distant. A sudden flashback hit her, laughter, the smell of popcorn, an amusement park. She saw herself running, her parents close behind, all laughing. It was a sunny day, full of joy. But then, why did this memory bring a pang of pain? Sarah strained her mind, trying to remember more. When exactly did her health problems begin? The images were blurry, doctors with worried expressions, her grandmother crying, herself in a hospital bed. But the details escaped her, like sand between her fingers. She picked up another photo, this one more recent. In it, Sarah, about 10 years old, was sitting in a hospital bed, pale but smiling. Beside her, a boy of the same age was making a funny face at the camera. Matthew, her best friend, the only link to the outside world that her grandmother allowed. An involuntary smile touched Sarah's lips as she thought of Matthew. He was her constant, the only one who treated her like a normal person, not a fragile patient. Matthew Wess, with his unruly hair and mischievous grin, who brought life and laughter to her monotonous days. Another flashback, she and Matthew, at 12, hiding in his basement, playing video games. It was a day she had escaped from home, determined to have a few hours of normalcy. The adrenaline of the adventure, the fear of being caught, the joy of feeling like an ordinary child, and then the crushing guilt at seeing her grandmother's distraught face when she returned home. Sarah shook her head, trying to push the memory away. Her eyes returned to the photo of her parents, the accident. Why couldn't she remember the details? Evelyn always said it was horrible, too traumatic for a child to bear. But shouldn't there be something, some memory? And her illness, when exactly did it start? Sarah frowned, concentrating. There were tests, many tests. Doctors speaking in complicated terms, her grandmother crying in the hospital corridor. But what was the diagnosis? Why, despite all the medication, did she feel fine most of the time? A disturbing thought began to form in Sarah's mind. What if there wasn't really an illness? The idea was absurd, of course. Her grandmother would never lie about something so serious, but still the doubt lingered like an itch she couldn't reach. Sarah picked up her phone, opening her chat with Matthew. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant. It was almost 4 a.m., but she knew he would understand. "Hey, Em, you awake?" she typed. The reply came almost immediately. "For you? Always." "What's up, Essie?" Sarah smiled. Matthew, always there for her. "I've been thinking, do you remember when I first got sick?" There was a pause before Matthew's reply. "It's kind of hazy. I remember you missing a lot of school. Your grandma was always worried." "Why?" "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm missing something, like there are pieces missing." Want me to come over tomorrow? We can talk better. Sarah hesitated. Matthew's visits were rare, always under Evelyn's watchful eye. Yes, please, I need to see you. She put her phone aside and turned her attention back to the photos. Her eyes fell on one in particular. Herself, about 8 years old, in a hospital bed. What caught her attention wasn't her own pale and fragile image, but the reflection in the window glass behind her. It was hard to see, but it seemed to be her grandmother, talking intensely with a doctor in the hallway. Sarah picked up the photo, bringing it closer to her eyes. There was something in Evelyn's posture, in the doctor's expression. It didn't look like a conversation about a seriously ill child. It looked like a discussion, an argument. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Sarah freeze. Quickly, she put the photos back in the box and hid it back in the chest. She jumped into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, just in time to see the door open softly. Evelyn poked her head into the room, her eyes scanning the surroundings until they landed on Sarah's sleeping form. Satisfied, she closed the door silently. Sarah released the breath she hadn't even realized she was holding. Her heart was racing, not from the near discovery, but from the doubts that now swarmed in her mind. As the sky outside began to lighten, heralding a new day, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would discover the truth about her condition, about her parents' accident, about everything. Matthew would help her. Together, they would unearth the secrets that seemed to be buried in her hazy memories. With this determination, Sarah finally fell asleep, the photo of her parents clutched to her chest, a talisman against the secrets and doubts that now threatened to crumble the carefully constructed world around her. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains of Sarah's room, creating dancing patterns on the floor. She was sitting on her bed, legs crossed, anxiously looking at the door. Matthew had promised to come, and she was counting the minutes. The sound of the doorbell made her heart leap. Muffled voices came from downstairs, Matthew and her grandmother talking. Sarah took a deep breath, bracing herself. This would not be an ordinary meeting between friends. Today she would share her doubts, her suspicions. The door opened and Matthew entered, his wide smile lighting up the room. "Hey, S, how's my favorite patient?" he joked, but his eyes conveyed concern. "Shh," Sarah whispered, pointing to the door. Matthew understood immediately, closing it softly behind him. "Di, what's going on, Sarah? Your message freaked me out," Matthew said, sitting beside her on the bed. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then the words began to flow. She told him about the hazy memories, the old photos, the doubts about her condition. Matthew listened intently, his face shifting from surprise to concern and, finally, to determination. You think it's possible that I'm not really sick?" Sarah finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. Matthew frowned, thoughtful. "That's a serious accusation, S. Your grandma loves you, that's obvious." I know, Sarah sighed. "But what if she's, I don't know, confused? What if she believes I'm sick, even if it's not true?" "Okay, let's think about this logically," Matthew said, slipping into his amateur detective mode. "We need proof, something concrete." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety at having shared her thoughts. "But how?" "It's not like we can just ask her." Matthew was silent for a moment, then his eyes lit up. "What if we could hear her when she thinks no one's listening?" Sarah stared at him, confused for an instant, then understanding dawned. "A recorder." "Exactly," Matthew grinned. "We can hide one somewhere in the house, maybe in the living room or the kitchen, places where your grandma spends a lot of time." Sarah's heart quickened at the idea. It was daring, risky, and exactly what she needed. "But where would we get a recorder?" Matthew pulled his phone out of his pocket. "Well, we have smartphones now. We can use a recording app. We just need to hide the phone in a strategic spot." The next few minutes were spent in frantic, whispered planning. They decided to use Matthew's old phone, which still worked but didn't have a SIM card. Sarah would hide it in the living room, under the sofa, where Evelyn usually spent hours watching her soap operas. "Remember," Matthew warned, "this is serious. We're invading your grandma's privacy. Only do this if you're absolutely sure." Sarah looked at her hands, conflict evident on her face. Then she raised her eyes, determination shining in them. "I need to know the truth, Em. I can't live with these doubts." Matthew nodded, handing her the phone. "Good luck, St. Mess. Let me know as soon as you have something." After Matthew left, Sarah waited. Dinner passed in a blur of contained anxiety. She barely touched her food, earning worried glances from Evelyn. "Are you feeling all right, darling?" Evelyn asked, her hand already reaching out to check Sarah's temperature. "I'm fine, Grandma," Sarah forced a smile. "I'm just a little tired." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Evelyn announced that she was going to bed. Sarah waited another half hour, her heart beating so loudly she was sure her grandmother could hear it from the other room. With silent steps, Sarah crept down the stairs. The house was quiet, only the ticking of the old clock in the living room breaking the silence. She approached the sofa, Matthew's phone clutched in her sweaty hand. Crouching down, Sarah began to slide the phone under the sofa. That's when she heard it, the creak of a floorboard in the hallway above. Panic hit her like an icy wave. Was Evelyn awake? Was she coming downstairs? Sarah froze, the phone halfway to its hiding place. The seconds dragged on, each one seeming like an eternity. Sarah didn't dare move, barely dared to breathe. Her heart was pounding so hard, she feared the sound would give her away. Finally, after what seemed like forever, silence returned. No other sound came from upstairs. With trembling hands, Sarah finished hiding the phone, making sure the recording app was running. She climbed the stairs as silently as possible, each step careful and measured. Reaching the top, Sarah hesitated. The door to Evelyn's room was ajar, unusual. She approached, her heart in her throat. Peeking through the crack, Sarah saw her grandmother sitting on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. Evelyn was murmuring something, so low that Sarah couldn't make out the words. There was a vulnerability in her grandmother's posture that Sarah had never seen before, and for a moment she felt a pang of guilt for her suspicions. Quickly, Sarah returned to her room, closing the door noiselessly. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. What if she was wrong? What if her grandmother found out? The doubts tormented her, preventing her from sleeping. The hours dragged on. Sarah alternated between periods of restless sleep and moments of anxious wakefulness. When the first rays of sunlight began to enter through the window, she was already awake, her eyes fixed on the door. Soon, the familiar sounds of morning began. Evelyn getting up, going downstairs, preparing breakfast. Sarah waited, counting the minutes. She needed to retrieve the phone before her grandmother found it. Heart pounding, Sarah went downstairs. Evelyn was in the kitchen, her back to the living room, busy preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Grandma," Sarah called, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm just going to get a book I left in the living room." "Of course, darling," Evelyn replied without turning around. "Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes." With quick, silent movements, Sarah retrieved the phone from its hiding place. She ran upstairs, locked herself in the bathroom, and with trembling fingers, accessed the recordings. As the audio began to play, Sarah felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. Whatever was on that recording, she knew her life would never be the same. Sarah's heart pounded as she, locked in the bathroom, pressed play on the recording. At first, only the background noise of the TV and the occasional sounds of Evelyn moving around the living room could be heard. Sarah was about to fast-forward the recording when her grandmother's voice rang out clear. "Hello, Dr. Miller? It's Evelyn Baker." Sarah held her breath. Doctor Miller had been her doctor for years. "Yes, about Sarah. No, she's not well. The symptoms have worsened considerably." Confused, Sarah frowned. She didn't remember feeling particularly unwell recently. Extreme fatigue, joint pain, frequent dizziness. Evelyn continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Doctor, I'm very worried. I think we need to increase the dosage of her medication." Sarah felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. None of this was true. She hadn't experienced any of these symptoms. The conversation continued, with Evelyn detailing a series of health problems that Sarah was supposedly facing. Each word was like a stab to the young woman's heart. When the recording ended, Sarah was sitting on the bathroom floor, silent tears streaming down her face. Her mind raced. Why would her grandmother lie like that? Was it possible that Evelyn truly believed she was sick? Or was something more sinister going on? Sarah stood up on shaky legs, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Who was she really? A sick, fragile girl, as she had always believed, or a healthy young woman, held captive in a prison of lies and medication? A whirlwind of emotions washed over her: anger, confusion, betrayal, fear. She needed answers. Now, with a determination she didn't know she possessed, Sarah left the bathroom and went downstairs. She found Evelyn in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as if it were a normal day, as if she hadn't just shattered Sarah's world with a single phone call. "Grandma," Sarah called, her voice steadier than she expected. "We need to talk." Evelyn turned, a smile on her lips that quickly disappeared when she saw Sarah's expression. "What is it, darling? You're pale. Are you feeling unwell?" "No," Sarah replied, the word laden with new meaning. "Actually, I'm feeling very well, and that's what we need to talk about." Evelyn frowned, confused. "I don't understand, Sarah. What's going on?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I heard your conversation with Dr. Miller." Evelyn's face paled visibly. "What? How should... That doesn't matter now," Sarah interrupted. "What matters is that you lied. You lied about my symptoms, about how I'm feeling. Why, Grandma? Why would you do that?" Evelyn swayed slightly, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Sarah, darling, you don't understand. I'm just trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising. "Tess, protect me from what? From life? From being normal?" "You're not normal, Sarah," Evelyn suddenly shouted, tears in her eyes. "You're special, fragile. You need special care." Sarah recoiled as if she had been slapped. "I'm not fragile. I never was. All these years, all this medication. Was it all a lie?" Evelyn shook her head frantically. No, you don't understand. There was a time when you were really sick, so sick I almost lost you, Sarah. I can't go through that again." Sarah's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about? When was I sick?" "When you were little, after the accident," Evelyn began, but then stopped abruptly, as if she had said too much. "What accident?" "My parents' accident," Sarah pressed, sensing she was close to a long-hidden truth. Evelyn looked away, her hands trembling visibly. "We can't talk about that. It's too painful, too dangerous for you to remember." Sarah felt a wave of frustration and anger rise in her chest. "No more secrets, Grandma, no more lies. I deserve to know the truth about my own life." But Evelyn seemed to have shut down completely. She shook her head repeatedly, murmuring, No, we can't. It's for your own good, Sarah. You don't understand." At that moment, looking at her grandmother, the woman who raised her, who cared for her for so many years, Sarah had a disturbing epiphany. Her illness wasn't physical. It was the result of years of overprotection, of induced anxiety, of a carefully constructed lie. "Grandma," Sarah said, her voice now softer, but laden with determination. "I'm not sick. I never was. At least not the way you think. Whatever happened in the past, it's over. I'm healthy. And from now on, I'm going to live my life as such." Evelyn looked at Sarah with a mixture of fear and despair. "No, Sarah, you can't. It's dangerous. You don't know." But Sarah had already turned, walking upstairs back to her room. Her heart was heavy, torn between love for her grandmother and anger at the betrayal. She knew this conversation was far from over, that there was much more to uncover. Locked in her room, Sarah picked up her phone with trembling hands. She needed to talk to Matthew, needed help understanding all of this. But before she could dial, a notification flashed on the screen, a message from an unknown number. "Sarah, we need to talk. About your parents, about the accident, about everything. Meet me at the park tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone. Dr. Peterson." Sarah stared at the message, a shiver running down her spine. Dr. Peterson, the mysterious new neighbor. How did he know? What else did he know? With a racing heart, Sarah realized she was on the verge of uncovering truths that could change her life forever. And there was no turning back. The clock read 2:55 p.m. when Sarah arrived at the park, her heart pounding against her chest. She glanced around, trying to spot Dr. Peterson among the few people strolling on that autumn afternoon. "Sarah?" A deep voice sounded behind her, causing her to spin around. The man before her was tall, with graying hair and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her. Dr. Peterson smiled gently, but Sarah noticed an underlying tension in his posture. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a nearby bench. "As we have much to discuss." Sarah sat down, her mind buzzing with questions. "How do you know about my parents? About the accident?" Dr. Peterson sighed deeply. "I was a colleague of your father's in medical school. We were close friends." Sarah's eyes widened. "My father was a doctor." "Yes, and one of the best I've ever known, Dr. Peterson replied, a hint of sadness in his voice. "Your mother was a nurse. They met at the hospital." Sarah absorbed the information, feeling as if she were hearing about strangers. "And the accident? What really happened?" Dr. Peterson hesitated, his eyes searching Sarah's face carefully. "Sarah, what do you remember about that night?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to access long-buried memories. Almost nothing. Flashes of light, the sound of sirens, and then just the hospital. "The accident wasn't an accident, Sarah," Dr. Peterson said softly. "Your father was investigating something at the hospital, something dangerous, and someone wanted to silence him." Sarah felt as if the air had been knocked out of her lungs. "Are you saying my parents were murdered?" Dr. Peterson nodded gravely. "I suspect so. And I think your grandmother knows more than she's letting on." Sarah shook her head, incredulous. "But why would my grandmother lie? Why keep me sick all these years?" "Protection, perhaps," Dr. Peterson suggested. "Or fear. Sarah, I need you to help me investigate. There's something bigger going on here, and I think you're the key to unraveling it all." Sarah felt a mixture of fear and determination rising within her. "What do I need to do?" Dr. Peterson smiled, but it was a strained smile. "For now, continue acting normally, but pay attention to everything, and keep in touch with me." As she walked back home, Sarah's mind reeled with the new information. She barely noticed Matthew waiting for her on the corner until he called out to her, "Sarah, what's going on? You disappeared all day." Sarah pulled Matthew into a tight hug, feeling the tears she had been holding back finally fall. In hurried whispers, she told Matthew about her conversation with Dr. Peterson. "This is crazy." Matthew murmured, his eyes wide. "It sounds like something out of a conspiracy movie." "I know," Sarah replied, wiping away her tears. "But it makes sense in a strange way. Metin, we need to investigate further. Will you help me?" Matthew nodded without hesitation. "Always. Where do we start?" In the following days, Sarah and Matthew plunged into a frantic investigation. They scoured online records, visited the local library in search of old newspapers, and even managed to access the archives of the hospital where Sarah's parents worked, thanks to a cousin of Matthew's who was an intern there. It was in Sarah's medical records that they made their first significant discovery. "Look at this." Matthew pointed to the computer screen. "Your blood tests from when you were 8 years old. They show completely normal levels for everything." Sarah frowned. "But that was the year I started taking heavy medication. Grandma said I was very sick." Matthew continued scrolling down the page. And here, 6 months later, sudden anemia, vitamin deficiencies, as if your body had collapsed overnight. Or as if someone had started giving me medication I didn't need, Sarah murmured, a chill running down her spine. As they dug deeper, more inconsistencies appeared. Diagnoses that changed without explanation. Treatments for conditions Sarah never exhibited symptoms for. "It's like someone was trying to keep you sick on purpose," Matthew said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. Sarah felt her world spin. But why? Why would my grandmother do that to me? Before Matthew could answer, the sound of voices coming from the garden caught their attention. Carefully, they peeked through the window of Sarah's room. In the garden, Evelyn was talking in a low voice with Dr. Peterson. The body language of both was tense, almost hostile. "And can't go on like this, Evelyn." Dr. Peterson's voice drifted up to them. "She deserves to know the truth." "No," Evelyn hissed. "You don't understand. If they find out she knows, who are they?" Sarah whispered to Matthew, who just shook his head, as confused as she was. Dr. Peterson took a step towards Evelyn. "I'm trying to protect you both, Evelyn, but I can't do that if you don't cooperate." Evelyn recoiled, her face a mask of fear and determination. "Stay away from us, Peter. You don't know what they're capable of." With that, Evelyn turned and quickly entered the house, leaving Dr. Peterson alone in the garden, looking frustrated and worried. Sarah stepped back from the window, her mind reeling. What's going on? Who are these people my grandmother is so afraid of?" Matthew placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I don't know, S. But we'll find out together." That night, lying in her bed, Sarah couldn't sleep. The pieces of her life's puzzle were scattered before her, but the image they formed was frightening and incomprehensible. Her phone vibrated with a message from Dr. Peterson. "Be careful. They're watching. Trust only those you truly know." Sarah stared at the message, a knot of fear forming in her stomach. Who was watching? Who could she really trust? As sleep finally enveloped her, Sarah had the unsettling feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering a truth that would change her life forever, and that this truth might be more dangerous than she could ever imagine. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of Sarah's room, finding her already awake, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't slept much, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The soft sound of a message arriving on her phone pulled her from her reverie. "Morning, how are you doing?" "Want to talk?" It was Matthew, always attentive, always present. An involuntary smile touched Sarah's lips. Amidst all the chaos and uncertainty, Matthew was her safe harbor, the only person she felt she could completely trust. "Can you come over? I need you," she replied. Half an hour later, Matthew quietly entered through Sarah's bedroom window, a skill honed over years of clandestine friendship. "Hey," he whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How are you really doing?" Sarah sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. "Honestly, I don't know, Em. It's like everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie." Matthew reached out, intertwining his fingers with hers. The gesture, so simple and familiar, brought a comfort that Sarah hadn't realized she needed so desperately. "We'll figure out the truth, Eskan, together," Matthew promised, his eyes locked on hers. In that moment, something shifted between them. The atmosphere in the room became charged with an electricity that neither of them could ignore. Sarah found herself leaning forward, her heart racing. Matthew hesitated for a second before doing the same. Their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss, full of unspoken promises and long-suppressed feelings. When they pulled apart, both were flushed and breathless. "Wow," Matthew murmured, a goofy smile on his face. Sarah giggled softly, feeling lighter than she had in days. "Yeah, wow." But reality soon reasserted itself. Sarah sighed, resting her head on Matthew's shoulder. "What are we going to do now, Em?" Matthew hugged her, his tone turning serious. "First, we need to understand what happened to your parents." "I think that's the key to all of this." Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "I agree, but where do we start?" "I have an idea," Matthew said, grabbing his laptop. "Let's search the newspaper archives from that time. If it really was a murder disguised as an accident, it must have left some kind of trail." The next few hours were spent in a frantic search. Sarah and Matthew combed through dozens of newspaper articles, police reports, and even posts on online conspiracy forums. It was on one of these forums that they found something intriguing. An anonymous user, posting under the pseudonym Whistleblower MD, had made a series of allegations about unethical practices at a major city hospital, the same hospital where Sarah's parents worked. "Look at this," Matthew pointed to the screen. "This post is from just 3 days before your parents' accident," Sarah read eagerly. "I've uncovered something big. Illegal tests. Patients at risk. I can't stay silent." If anything happens to me, know that the truth is in Files B37. My God, Sarah whispered. Do you think it could have been my father? Matthew nodded gravely. It's possible, and if it is, that explains a lot. Maybe your father discovered something he shouldn't have, and paid the price for it. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. And me. Why keep me sick all these years? Maybe to protect you, Matthew suggested softly. If the people responsible for your parents' accident knew you might have information. Sarah shuddered at the implication. Her grandmother, despite everything, was trying to keep her safe. But at what cost? I can't keep living like this, Em, Sarah said, her voice firm despite the tears. I need to know the truth about myself, about my health. Matthew looked at her with concern. What are you thinking of doing? Sarah took a deep breath, making a decision she knew would change everything. I'm going to stop taking the medication, all of it. Sarah, are you sure? That could be dangerous, Matthew warned, but Sarah could see that he understood her need to do this. I need to know, Em. I need to find out who I really am without all these pills. Will you help me? Matthew held her hands firmly. Always. But let's do this smart, okay? We'll monitor your health closely, and if anything seems wrong, we'll back off immediately. Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. Deal. In the days that followed, Sarah began her secret experiment. She pretended to take the medication in front of Evelyn, but in reality hid them in an empty bottle in her room. To her surprise and relief, she felt no drastic changes in her health. In fact, after a few days, Sarah realized she felt more energized, more alive. A week later, Sarah and Matthew were back in her room, reviewing the notes they had been taking on her health. It's incredible, Matthew murmured, looking at the data. Your blood pressure, your energy levels, everything is more normal, better than normal, actually. Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, relief at knowing she was healthy, anger at all the lost years, and a deep sadness when she thought of her grandmother. What do I do now, Em? She asked, her voice trembling. How do I confront my grandmother with this? Matthew pulled her into a tight hug. I don't know, S, but we're in this together, remember. We'll find out the truth about your health, about your parents, about everything. At that moment, embraced by Matthew, Sarah felt a renewed determination. She would uncover the truth, no matter how painful or dangerous it might be. And with Matthew by her side, she knew she could face anything. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made them quickly pull apart. Evelyn knocked on the door, entering with a glass of water and Sarah's medication. It's time for your medicine, darling, Evelyn said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Matthew before turning to her grandmother. Of course, Grandma, thank you. As she pretended to swallow the pills, Sarah knew she was on the verge of a revelation that would change everything, and she was ready to face whatever came next with the truth and Matthew by her side. The attic of the house was shrouded in shadows, the air heavy with the smell of dust and forgotten memories. Sarah, with a flashlight in hand, moved carefully between stacked boxes and covered furniture. Matthew followed close behind, both silent, aware that Evelyn was sleeping downstairs. Are you sure you want to do this, Essie? Matthew whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah nodded, determination shining in her eyes. I need to know, Em. The truth is here somewhere. They began to search the boxes methodically, leafing through dusty photo albums and stacks of yellowed documents. It was when Sarah opened a worn shoebox that her heart nearly stopped. Oh my God, she gasped, holding a bundle of papers. These are court documents about my custody. Matthew leaned closer, reading over Sarah's shoulder. The documents dated from shortly after Sarah's parents' accident. In them, Evelyn vehemently argued that she was the only one capable of caring for Sarah due to her fragile medical condition. But I wasn't sick, Sarah murmured, confused. At least, not that I remember. Continuing the search, they found more papers, medical reports, prescriptions, hospital notes. They all seemed to paint a picture of a chronically ill child, requiring constant care. This doesn't make sense, Matthew commented, frowning. How could someone fabricate so much evidence? Sarah was about to answer when her fingers touched something different, a small, leather-bound book hidden at the bottom of the box. Her heart quickened as she recognized the handwriting on the cover. It's my mother's diary," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. With shaking hands, Sarah opened the diary. The pages were filled with her mother's notes, thoughts, and observations. Sarah began to read, absorbing each word as if it were water in the desert. As she progressed through the diary, a very different picture of her childhood began to emerge. Her mother described Sarah as a healthy, lively, and energetic child. There was no mention of chronic illnesses or serious conditions. "Look at this." Sarah pointed to an entry dated just a week before the accident. "My mum writes about how excited I was to start school, how healthy and ready I was for this new phase." Matthew read the passage, his face a mixture of surprise and concern. "Sarah, this completely contradicts what your grandmother has always said about you." Before Sarah could respond, a noise from downstairs made them freeze. Slow footsteps climbed the stairs towards the attic. Panicked, Sarah and Matthew turned off the flashlight and hid behind a stack of boxes. Sarah's heart was beating so hard she feared it could be heard. The attic door opened slowly, and Evelyn's figure appeared, illuminated by the dim light coming from the hallway. She seemed lost in thought, murmuring to herself as she moved between the boxes. "I can't lose her," Evelyn whispered. "I can't let them take her like they took Claire and David." Sarah had to stifle a gasp upon hearing her parents' names. She watched, motionless, as her grandmother rummaged through some boxes, finally picking up a folder before leaving the attic. When Evelyn's footsteps disappeared, Sarah and Matthew emerged from their hiding place, both shaken by what they had witnessed. "What was that?" Matthew asked, his voice a tense whisper. Sarah shook her head, confused and disturbed. "I don't know, but it seems like my grandmother is hiding a lot more than we imagined." They decided it was time to leave the attic. Carefully, Sarah tucked her mother's diary into her bag, determined to read it entirely later. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, her mind still reeling from the previous night's revelations. She went downstairs for breakfast, finding Evelyn in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as if nothing had happened. "Good morning, darling," Evelyn smiled, but Sarah noticed the tension in her eyes. "How are you feeling today?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm fine, Grandma. Actually, I've been feeling really good lately." Evelyn seemed to stiffen slightly, but her smile remained. "That's good, darling. But don't forget to take your medicine, okay?" Sarah nodded silently, the weight of the secret she carried heavy on her chest. Later that day, Sarah met with Dr. Peterson in the park again. She had decided that she needed more answers and hoped he could provide them. "Sarah," Dr. Peterson greeted her, his face serious, "have you discovered anything new?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before sharing her discoveries from the previous night. Dr. Peterson listened intently, his face growing increasingly grave. "Sarah," he said finally, "I think it's time I was completely honest with you. I'm not just an old friend of your parents. I'm a psychologist specializing in a disorder called Munchausen by proxy." Sarah frowned, confused. "And what's that?" "It's a condition in which a caregiver, usually a parent or guardian, exaggerates or fabricates health problems in someone under their care," Dr. Peterson explained gently. "Usually, it's motivated by a deep need for attention or control." Sarah felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "Are you saying my grandmother?" Dr. Peterson nodded gravely. "I suspect so. I've been observing Evelyn's behavior for some time, and many signs point to this. But Sarah, it's important to understand that if this is true, your grandmother isn't a bad person. She's probably acting out of fear and trauma." Sarah struggled to process this information. Flashbacks of her childhood raced through her mind. The countless doctor visits, the constant medication, the isolation from other children. It all began to make a terrible kind of sense. "What do I do now?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Peterson placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "First, we need to be certain. Continue monitoring your health without the medication, but carefully. And Sarah, remember, Your grandmother needs help as much as you do." As she walked back home, Sarah felt as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. The revelations from her mother's diary, Evelyn's secrets, and now this terrifying possibility of Munchausen by proxy, it was almost too much to bear. But amidst the whirlwind of emotions, Sarah felt a determination growing within her. She would uncover the whole truth, no matter how painful it might be. And maybe, just maybe, she could not only free herself, but also help her grandmother face her own demons. With this resolve, Sarah entered the house, ready to face whatever the future held. The truth was emerging, and there was no turning back now. The air in the living room was thick with tension. Sarah, Evelyn, and Dr. Peterson sat on, forming a triangle of intense gazes and raw emotions. Matthew waited outside, ready to offer support if needed. Sarah took a deep breath, summoning her courage. "Grandma," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk about something very important." Evelyn glanced nervously from Sarah to Dr. Peterson. "What is it, darling?" "About my health," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "About the medication, the constant doctor appointments, everything." Evelyn paled visibly. "Sarah, you know it's all for your own good. You're fragile. You need special care." Dr. Peterson intervened gently. "Evelyn, I think it's time we face the truth. All of us." Sarah took her grandmother's hand, noticing how it trembled. "Grandma, I stopped taking the medication weeks ago." The shock on Evelyn's face was palpable. "What? But how? Why?" "Because I needed to know the truth," Sarah explained, tears welling up in her eyes. "And the truth is, I'm not sick." "I never was, not the way you thought." Evelyn began to shake her head frantically. No, you don't understand. You need the medicine. You'll get sick." Dr. Peterson leaned forward. "Evelyn, why do you believe so strongly that Sarah will get sick?" Evelyn looked at him, her eyes filled with fear and anguish. Because I can't lose her. Not like I lost Claire. I can't go through that again." Sarah felt her heart clench. "Grandma, what are you talking about? What happened to Mom?" Evelyn closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Your mother, my Claire. She was so healthy, so full of life. And then suddenly she was gone. The accident." Her voice failed. Dr. Peterson intervened softly. "Evelyn, you developed an irrational fear of losing Sarah the same way, didn't you? This fear transformed into a need to protect her from all possible dangers, real or imagined." Evelyn nodded slowly, sobbing. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing Sarah too. I had to keep her safe. I had to protect her from everything." Sarah felt hot tears streaming down her face. "But Grandma, don't you realize, by trying to protect me, you deprived me of living." "I only wanted the best for you," Evelyn whispered, her voice broken. Dr. Peterson spoke gently. "Evelyn, what you did is called Munchausen by proxy. It's a serious condition where a caregiver exaggerates or creates health problems in someone under their care. Usually, it's motivated by unresolved trauma and deep anxiety." Evelyn looked at him shocked. I didn't know. I truly believed Sarah needed all this protection." Sarah squeezed her grandmother's hand. "I know you love me, Grandma, but what you did wasn't healthy for either of us." Evelyn suddenly seemed to crumble, decades of fear and guilt coming to the surface. She began to sob uncontrollably, her body shaking with the force of her emotions. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I was so scared. After losing your parents, the thought of something happening to you, I couldn't bear it." Sarah moved to embrace her grandmother, her own tears flowing freely. "I understand, Grandma. I understand the fear. But we can't live like this." Dr. Peterson watched the scene with compassion. "Evelyn, Sarah, what you both have gone through is deeply traumatic. But there is hope. With the proper treatment and therapy, we can work to overcome this." Evelyn raised her head, her eyes red and swollen. You think I can get better? That I can fix what I did?" "Absolutely, Dr. Peterson assured her. "It will take time and effort, but it's possible. The first step is recognizing the problem, and you've already done that." Sarah pulled away gently, looking into her grandmother's eyes. "Grandma, I want you to be okay. I want both of us to be okay. But for that, we need to be honest with each other. Completely." Evelyn nodded slowly. "You're right, darling. No more secrets, no more lies." "Then tell me," Sarah asked softly. "Tell me about my parents, about the accident, about everything." Evelyn took a deep breath, bracing herself. "Your parents, they were wonderful people. Sarah, your mother was a nurse, your father was a doctor. They met at the hospital, and it was love at first sight." Sarah listened intently, absorbing every word about the parents she had barely known. "They were dedicated to their work, always wanting to help others," Evelyn continued. "But then, your father discovered something. Something about illegal tests at the hospital. He wanted to expose it, to do the right thing." Sarah felt her heart quicken. "And that's why they—" Evelyn nodded sadly. "The accident. It wasn't an accident. Someone wanted to silence them, and they succeeded." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with grief and painful revelations. Dr. Peterson spoke softly. "Evelyn, you kept Sarah isolated and sick, not only out of fear of losing her, but also to protect her from those who might want to harm her, didn't you?" Evelyn nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. "And I thought, if they thought Sarah was too sick to know anything, they would leave her alone." Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions: compassion for her grandmother, anger at the life that had been taken from her, fear of the dangers that might still exist. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, her voice small. Dr. Peterson looked at both of them with determination. "Now, we begin to heal. Evelyn, you will start intensive therapy to deal with your trauma and anxiety. Sarah, you will also have sessions to process all of this and rediscover who you are without the shadow of illness." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. "And what about with those responsible for my parents' accident?" "Leave that to me, Doctor," Peterson assured her. "I have contacts who can investigate discreetly. For now, you both need to focus on healing." Evelyn reached out to Sarah, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. "I'm so sorry for everything, my darling. Do you think you can ever forgive me?" Sarah looked at her grandmother, seeing for the first time not just the controlling woman she knew, but a person broken by fear and loss. She took Evelyn's hand, squeezing it gently. "It will take time, Grandma," Sarah said honestly, "but we'll work on it. Together." As the sun set outside, casting a golden glow through the window, Sarah and Evelyn remained embraced, crying together. It was the end of a painful chapter, but also the beginning of something new, a path of healing, understanding, and perhaps, eventually, forgiveness. Dr. Peterson watched the scene with a gentle smile. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but he saw hope there. The truth, however painful, had finally come to light, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning for both of them. Dr. Miller's office was silent, the air heavy with the smell of paper and antiseptic. Sarah sat stiffly in the chair opposite the doctor's desk, her hands nervously clutching the edge of her blouse. Matthew sat beside her, a comforting presence amidst the palpable tension. "Here they are, Sarah," Dr. Miller said, placing a thick folder on the table. "All your medical records, from birth to present. Are you sure you want to see this?" Sarah nodded firmly. "I need to know the truth, Doctor, all of it." The doctor sighed, a look of concern in his eyes. "I understand, but be prepared. There may be information that's difficult to process." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the folder. Matthew leaned in, ready to offer support. Together, they began to examine the documents, leafing through years of medical history. The first few years seemed normal: routine checkups, vaccinations, minor childhood illnesses. But then, when Sarah was about 5, something changed drastically. "What's this?" Sarah murmured, her eyes widening as she read a detailed medical report. Matthew read aloud. "Patient exhibits symptoms of extreme fatigue, joint pain, unexplained rashes, suspicion of a rare autoimmune disease." Sarah felt her heart race. This couldn't be right. She didn't remember any of this. They continued reading, uncovering a series of tests, experimental treatments, and hospital stays that spanned nearly 2 years. Sarah was in shock. How could she have forgotten something so significant? Here, Matthew pointed to a document dated from when Sarah was 7. It looks like they found a treatment that worked. Sarah read eagerly. The report detailed an intensive regimen of medication and therapies that miraculously seemed to have put the disease into remission. I don't remember any of this, Sarah whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Dr. Miller, who had remained silent, spoke softly. Sarah, sometimes traumatic experiences like this can be suppressed by the mind, especially in young children. Sarah continued to leaf through the documents, her mind reeling with this new information. It was then that she found something that made her heart stop for a moment. It was a letter, handwritten on hospital letterhead. The date at the top was exactly 8 years ago. With trembling hands, Sarah began to read aloud. Dear Sarah, I am writing to express my joy and relief in confirming that you are officially in complete remission. Your latest tests show no signs of the disease. You are truly a medical miracle, and your strength and resilience are inspiring. Congratulations on your recovery. I am confident that you will have a long and healthy life ahead of you. Sincerely, Dr. Claire Montgomery. Sarah looked at Matthew, her eyes wide with the revelation. 8 years ago, and that's exactly when Grandma started intensifying her care for me. When the medication increased, when I was taken out of school. Matthew frowned, processing the information. But if you were cured, why would your grandmother? Dr. Miller intervened gently. Sarah, I think I can explain that. You see, after your recovery, your grandmother became extremely anxious about the possibility of a relapse. She insisted on continuing the treatment, even after we explained that it was no longer necessary. Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, shock, confusion, and a strange sense of relief. So I really was sick, but I got better? The doctor nodded. For yes, Sarah, you had a difficult battle as a child, but you won. The problem was that your grandmother never fully accepted that the danger had passed. Matthew took Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. That explains so much, S. Your grandmother's constant fear, the overprotectiveness. Sarah shook her head, trying to process everything. But why don't I remember? Why did Grandma never tell me about the cure? Dr. Miller sighed. Trauma can affect memory in strange ways, Sarah. And as for your grandmother, well, fear can make people act irrationally. She probably believed she was protecting you by continuing the treatment. Sarah was silent for a long moment, leafing through the documents absently. Her eyes fell on a recent report, dated just a few weeks ago. Wait, she said, her voice trembling. This says that all my recent tests are normal, perfectly normal. Dr. Miller nodded. Yes, Sarah, despite all the unnecessary medication you've taken in recent years, your body is in excellent health. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anger. All these years and all this medication, and it was all unnecessary. The doctor looked at her with compassion. Medically speaking, yes, but it's important to understand that your grandmother wasn't acting out of malice. She was trapped in a cycle of fear and anxiety. Matthew squeezed Sarah's hand. Like this changes everything, doesn't it? Sarah nodded slowly, silent tears streaming down her face. Yes and no. Grandma still kept me prisoner of a disease that no longer existed. But now I understand why. Dr. Miller leaned forward. Sarah, what your grandmother did wasn't right. But now that we know the whole truth, we can begin to heal not only your body, but also your relationship with her. Sarah wiped away her tears, a determination growing within her. Yes, we can, and we will. She stood up, holding the folder with her medical records as if it were a precious treasure. Thank you, Dr. Miller, for keeping these records, for telling us the truth. The doctor smiled gently. It's the least I could do, Sarah. And remember, I'm here if you need anything else. As they left the office, Matthew put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. How are you feeling? Sarah took a deep breath, looking at the clear sky outside. Honestly, I don't know. Relieved to know I'm really healthy, sad for what I went through as a child, angry with my grandmother, but also understanding a little more. Matthew nodded. It's a lot to process, but we're in this together. Remember. Sarah smiled, grateful for Matthew's constant presence. Yes, we are. And now, I think it's time to have another conversation with my grandmother. A final conversation, with the whole truth on the table. The living room was steeped in a tense silence. Sarah sat rigidly on the sofa, the folder containing her medical records clutched in her lap like a shield. Evelyn occupied the opposite armchair, her hands trembling slightly as her eyes darted between Sarah and Dr. Peterson, who stood by the window, a calm presence amidst the impending emotional storm. "Grandma," Sarah began, her voice surprisingly steady, "I know the truth now. About my childhood illness, about the recovery, about everything." Evelyn paled visibly, her eyes widening with a mixture of fear and guilt. "Sarah, Please," Sarah interrupted gently. "Let me finish. I know I was really sick when I was little. I know it was a difficult battle. But I also know that I recovered, Grandma, fully recovered, 8 years ago." Tears began to stream down Evelyn's wrinkled face. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Dr. Peterson stepped forward. "Evelyn, why don't you tell Sarah how you were feeling back then, when you learned she was cured?" Evelyn took a shaky breath. "I was terrified. When you got sick, Sarah, it was as if the world had collapsed. After losing your parents, the thought of losing you too, I couldn't bear it." Sarah felt her own throat tighten with emotion. "But I got better, Grandma. The doctors said I was cured." Evelyn nodded, wiping away her tears. I know, but the fear never went away. Every time you coughed, every time you seemed tired, I panicked. What if the illness came back? What if this time we couldn't cure it?" Dr. Peterson intervened softly. "What Evelyn is describing is a common response to trauma, Sarah. Fear can distort our perception of reality, making us see threats where they don't exist." Sarah wrestled with the conflicting emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "But Grandma, you kept me trapped for years. Medications I didn't need. Isolation from school, from friends. How could you do that?" Evelyn sobbed, her whole body trembling. I believed I was protecting you. Every pill, every precaution, in my mind, it was what kept you safe, healthy. But it wasn't real," Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising with frustration. "You stole my childhood, my adolescence, based on an irrational fear." Dr. Peterson placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Your feelings are valid, Sarah. You have every right to be angry, but it's also important to understand that your grandmother wasn't acting out of malice, but out of a deeply rooted fear." Evelyn suddenly stood up, her legs shaking. "Wait, there's something you need to see." She hurried out of the room, leaving Sarah and Dr. Peterson exchanging confused glances. Minutes later, Evelyn returned, carrying a worn leather-bound book. "This is the diary I kept during your illness," Evelyn explained, her voice trembling. I've never shown this to anyone." With hesitant hands, Sarah took the diary. As she opened it, she was immediately struck by her grandmother's frantic handwriting, pages and pages of anguish and fear documented in painful detail. Sarah began to read aloud, her voice choked with emotion. Day 37 of hospitalization. Sarah had another episode today. The doctors rushed in. There were so many tubes, so many beeping machines, and I thought I would lose her right there. How can I keep breathing if she stops? How can I live in a world without my little Sarah? Silent tears streamed down Sarah's face as she turned the pages, reading excerpts of her grandmother's struggle. Day 89, new treatment today. Sarah screamed in pain. I wanted to take her place, to suffer for her. Why can't it be me? Why does it have to be my precious girl? Day 156. Improvement. The doctors are optimistic, but I'm afraid to rejoice. What if it's temporary? What if she gets worse again? I can't let my guard down. I can't risk losing her. Sarah closed the diary, feeling emotionally exhausted. She looked at her grandmother, seeing her in a completely new light. Not as the controlling woman who had suffocated her for years, but as someone deeply traumatized by the fear of losing what she loved most. "Grandma," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't know. I didn't remember any of this. Evelyn approached hesitantly, sitting beside Sarah on the sofa. "You were so small, darling, so fragile. Seeing you in that hospital bed, struggling to breathe, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced." Dr. Peterson spoke softly. "Evelyn, you went through immense trauma. Seeing Sarah so ill, Sharon, especially after losing your daughter and son-in-law, must have been devastating." Evelyn nodded, tears falling freely. "When the doctors said she was cured, I wanted to believe it. But the fear never went away. Every day was a battle against the terror that the illness might return." Sarah took her grandmother's hand, feeling the conflict within herself. The anger was still there, the frustration for lost years. But now, there was also understanding, and a deep sorrow for her grandmother's suffering. "Grandma," Sarah said softly, "I understand now why you did what you did. But you need to understand that keeping me trapped wasn't the answer. You weren't protecting me. You were imprisoning us, both of us." Evelyn sobbed. I know. I messed everything up, didn't I? I hurt you trying to protect you." Dr. Peterson intervened. "Evelyn, Sarah, what you both went through is immensely complex. There are no villains here, just people struggling with deep traumas. The important thing now is how we move forward." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision on her shoulders. "Grandma, I love you, and I know you love me. But what happened? It can't continue. We need help, both of us." Evelyn nodded, squeezing Sarah's hand. "Yes, you're right. I'll do anything to fix this, Sarah, anything." Dr. Peterson smiled gently. "That's a great first step. I suggest you both start therapy, individually and together. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but I see a lot of love and strength here. I believe you can overcome this." Sarah looked at her grandmother, seeing not only the fear and guilt, but also the immense love that had always been there. "Let's try, Grandma. Together. It won't be easy, and I'm still hurt and angry. But I want to understand, I want to heal. We both deserve that." Evelyn hugged Sarah, sobbing with relief and remorse. "Thank you, my darling. Thank you for giving me this chance." As the sun set outside, casting a golden glow through the window, Sarah and Evelyn remained embraced, crying together. It was the end of a painful chapter, but also the beginning of something new. A path of healing, understanding, and perhaps eventually forgiveness. Dr. Peterson watched the scene with a gentle smile. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but he saw hope there. The truth, however painful, had finally come to light, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning for both of them. The months that followed the revelation were an emotional roller coaster for Sarah and Evelyn. Twice a week, they met in the cozy office of Dr. Emily Carter, a family therapist recommended by Dr. Peterson. At first, the sessions were tense, filled with uncomfortable silences and choked back tears. But gradually, communication began to flow. "Remember," Dr. Carter often said, "the goal isn't to erase the past, but to learn from it and build a better future." Sarah discovered that expressing her anger and frustration in a healthy way was liberating. Evelyn, in turn, faced her deepest fears and began to recognize how her trauma had affected her actions. Alongside the family sessions, Sarah began her journey of personal rediscovery. Free from the medical restrictions imposed for years, she experienced life with a newfound vigor. Runs in the park, swimming at the local pool, even a dance class. Activities that once seemed unattainable now filled her days with joy and vitality. "It's amazing," Sarah remarked to Matthew during one of their walks. "I feel alive. Truly alive, for the first time." Matthew smiled, squeezing her hand. "You've always been strong. Now the world can see it too." Evelyn watched Sarah's transformation with a mixture of pride and apprehension. In her individual sessions with Dr. Peterson, she worked to manage her anxiety and learned to loosen the reins. "It's not easy," Evelyn admitted during a family session. "Every time Sarah goes out, I still feel that tightness in my chest. But I'm learning to breathe, to calm myself. I'm learning to trust." Sarah looked at her grandmother with teary eyes. "I see the effort you're making, Grandma. It means a lot to me." As summer gave way to autumn, Sarah found herself facing a crucial decision: what to do with her newfound future. After much reflection and long conversations with Matthew and Evelyn, she came to a conclusion. "I want to study psychology," Sarah announced during a quiet dinner one evening. Evelyn stopped eating, surprised. "Psychology," Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes, after everything we've been through, after seeing how trauma can affect a family, I want to help other people overcome their fears and traumas. I want to make a difference." Evelyn reached across the table, taking Sarah's hand. "I'm so proud of you, darling. You're going to be amazing." The following months were a whirlwind of preparations. Sarah, with Matthew's tireless support, studied for the entrance exams, while Evelyn helped her with applications and paperwork. Finally, on a sunny September morning, the big day arrived. Sarah stood before the mirror, nervously adjusting her outfit. Today was the day she would officially begin her university journey. "Sarah," Evelyn's voice came from the other side of the door. "Can I come in?" "Of course, Grandma," Sarah replied. Evelyn entered, carrying a small box. "I have something for you." Sarah opened the box, revealing a delicate silver necklace with a butterfly pendant. "It was your mother's," Evelyn explained, her voice choked with emotion. "She wore it on her first day of nursing school. I thought you might like to have it today." Sarah felt tears welling up. "Oh, Grandma, it's beautiful." "Thank you." Evelyn helped Sarah put on the necklace, her hands trembling slightly. "You look so much like her. So strong, so determined." Sarah turned, hugging her grandmother tightly. "I love you, Grandma. Thank you for being there for me." The moment was interrupted by the doorbell. "That must be Matthew," Sarah smiled, wiping away her tears. They went downstairs together, finding Matthew in the living room holding a bouquet of flowers. "Wow," he said, his eyes shining as he saw Sarah. "You look amazing." Sarah blushed, taking the flowers. "Thank you, Em." Evelyn watched the two of them with a soft smile. "How about a picture before we go? To mark the moment." The three of them positioned themselves on the porch, with Sarah in the center, Matthew and Evelyn on either side. The camera timer counted down, capturing the moment. 3 smiling faces, full of hope and possibilities. On the way to the university, Sarah looked out the car window, watching the city go by. Every street, every building seemed new and full of promise. "Nervous?" Matthew asked softly. Sarah smiled, taking his hand. "A little. But more than that, I'm excited. I feel like I'm finally starting my real life." Evelyn, driving, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Remember, darling, we're here for you. Always." Arriving on campus, Sarah felt her heart quicken. Students of all ages hurried past, carrying books and backpacks. The air was thick with anticipation and new beginnings. Before heading to freshman orientation, Sarah turned to Evelyn and Matthew. "I wouldn't be here without you two," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Grandma, thank you for never giving up on me, even when things got tough. And Matthew, thank you for always believing in me, for helping me find my strength." Evelyn hugged Sarah tightly. "And go and conquer the world, my darling. I'm so proud of you." Matthew gave Sarah a soft kiss. "You'll be amazing, S. I can't wait to see everything you'll accomplish." With a final wave, Sarah turned and walked towards the main building. As she climbed the steps, she felt the weight of her mother's necklace against her chest, a reminder of her past and a promise for the future. Evelyn and Matthew watched Sarah disappear into the crowd of students. "She'll be all right, won't she?" Evelyn asked, a hint of her old anxiety surfacing. Matthew smiled, placing a comforting hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "She'll be more than all right, Mrs. Baker. Sarah is the strongest person I know. This is just the beginning of something incredible." As they walked back to the car, Evelyn felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. The fear was still there, a small voice in the back of her mind, but now she knew how to silence it. Sarah was safe, healthy, and most importantly, happy. The sun shone brightly in the blue sky, promising a glorious day. For Sarah, Evelyn, and Matthew, it was more than just a new day. It was the dawn of a new chapter in their lives, filled with hope, healing, and infinite possibilities.